it's so important as a point leader, founder, entrepreneur, owner, that nobody's ever going to care about it as much as you do. So we can't expect them to. That is, and that's freeing. Actually, it's freeing for you, but it's also freeing for your team. Now, it doesn't mean that that you have low expectations, but just the mindset that says, "Hey, I know that I'm gonna always be thinking about this," and that you're not, like, you have other things in life.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners. Hey, today I am excited to welcome Brad Lomenick to the Business of Advice podcast. As many of you know, if you've been listening to this, I believe that leadership is the most important part of building a great business, and Brad knows leadership. Brad Lomenick is passionate about raising up great leaders around the globe, actually. For more than 10 years, he served as the lead visionary and president of Catalyst, one of America's largest and most influential conference movements of young leaders. He has more than 2 decades of experience working alongside thought leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs. And actually, prior to running Catalyst, Brad spent several years working for the legendary leadership author John Maxwell. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit today. He's the host of a great podcast called H3 Leadership that you should be listening to. Weekly, he's curating not only the best for high-capacity leaders to stay in the know and up to date, but just has an incredible lineup of guests on there. Actually, had a mutual friend of ours on I was just listening to the other day when Greg Brenneman was on there. He's the author of the groundbreaking book, The Catalyst Leader, 8 Essentials for Becoming a Changemaker, as well as his most recent bestseller, and this is the one that I read that introduced me to him, which is H3 Leadership, Be Humble, Stay Hungry, Always Hustle, both published from Thomas Nelson. Brad, great to finally have you on here, buddy. I know we've talked in person a few times, but thanks for joining the podcast.
I love it, Cody. Thanks for having me. And listen, can I just take you around and have you introduce me everywhere?
Happy to do it. So they write good intros. I like that about them. So
good team.
What's funny too is as we've gotten to know each other a little over the last few months, have so many mutual friends and just mutual interests. So I'm excited to spend some time together today.
Yeah. Shout out David Nurse.
Yes.
Who connected us originally.
David's getting good at that. So, well, let me jump in. I'm going to ask you just kind of kickoff question. Your background to me is intriguing and maybe the best place to start. Can you walk us through your time at Catalyst? And then I think this leads a little bit into the book, your self-described kind of transformation and self-discovery, which led to the book H3 Leadership.
Sure. Well, Catalyst was 22 years ago now that it really got started. And I was actually, when Catalyst really began, I was helping John Maxwell's organization as a consultant, helping write some business plans and doing some research. And we had a number of brands that we were trying to help John navigate and his team. And one of these was Catalyst, and it was like this next gen leadership gathering. The first one started in 2000. There was this, this big idea of what would it look like for 20 and 30 somethings to get together in a space and in an environment, have some speakers, create an experience, and really start to, I would say, inspire the next wave of leadership. Yep. And especially somebody who was working with John Maxwell, who at that time was in his 50s and kind of now looking back, at that point. So I was in my mid-20s, Cody. I was a knucklehead, still am. I'm just older now as a knucklehead. But, a couple of years into it, there was a bunch of us working on it. A guy named Gabe Lyons, who now runs something called Q and Q Ideas that does really, really innovative conferences for Christian leaders. And a couple of years into it, it just needed a leader. And so I jumped in and tried to, steer the ship for a number of years. But here's one thing I really appreciate, especially as it relates to John Maxwell and the Catalyst story, was that he's really the founder. He started it. Like there was a bunch of us who were younger on the team that really took it and ran with it. But John had the ability to hand it to us and say, you guys, this is your thing. And, he was also very clear of, I don't necessarily need to speak at it. If you want me to, I will. And so that's when we brought in somebody named Andy Stanley, who at that time was, in his 40s, had just started fairly recently North Point Community Church in Atlanta. And Andy, in many ways, became the the voice
Face of it, yeah.
of in the face of Catalyst. And John was just very comfortable with that, and so I love that about his ability to hand something to us and then say, if you need me, I'll be there, but otherwise you guys take it and run. And we really did try to build something, Cody, that was, I would say it was personality less, meaning that the brand of Catalyst, we wanted that to be the lead story. And part of that was because we wanted it to feel like it was a unifying gathering. I love the years when I was leading it, and people would say, now, who's in charge of this thing? Like, is this a North Point thing? Is this a Brad Lomenick thing? Is this a John Maxwell thing? And I'm like, well, yes. I mean, and the idea that we could create something that was bigger than just one of us was a really big idea for us, and I think allowed us to actually connect to the generation and to leaders who we were trying to gather. And nothing wrong with building a personality-driven organization, but for us in that season, the last 20 years, it really was important to make it about a bigger story than just me or anybody else who was part of it.
And then you had this what I'll call transformation that led to you writing this book. Maybe walk us through that.
Well, I wrote The Catalyst Leader. That was my first book, which was really more the story of Catalyst, connected to my story, and trying to give it a personality to be connected to, because telling a story about a brand is difficult in a book form. And then 2 years later, I wrote this book, H3 Leadership. And a lot of the reason I wrote that was because I had navigated a real season of I would say, close to dysfunction, actually close to burnout. And, I had, this is so true. I mean, a lot of people who are listening to this or watching this will raise their hand around the question, have you ever been to that place where you almost ended up destroying the thing you helped build? Yes. I mean, so many of us who are hard drivers, we're probably Enneagram 3s or 8s, we're ENTJs. We go build things. We have incredible amounts of ambition and drive, but we end up almost taking ourselves out of the game. We're like the boxer who will never actually bow out. They will have to get knocked out before they ever step out of the ring. And so for me, I was leading this movement that was supposed to be like about creating great leaders. And we were up and to the right, Cody. We were, the measurables were all we're all hitting the right levels of growth and impact. But internally for me, and even with our team, I was starting to be toxic. And a lot of that was because of the weight of carrying something that's pretty big. And it was a lot of the pressure of, you got to outdo the year before. You got to, instead of having 15,000 in an arena, how about we go to a 20,000 seat arena and let's fill that up. And so I just became a bit dysfunctional. It wasn't a burnout. I mean, I was short of that for sure.
Yeah.
But if you ask the team, they were like, man, Brad, the Brad we started with is not the Brad we're now following in this season. And it was small things, it was that I didn't celebrate as much as I once did. It always felt like everything was in a hurry. The things that I would be really, really appropriately empowering to other people. Now I felt like I had to control. And we always default to things, that we are probably our dark side or shadow side of our leadership. And that was the reason for the book. I had sort of a recalibration. I stepped out of actually leading Catalyst. Part of the book is talking about a sabbatical I took. And so for me, it was like, what's the next 30 or 40 years of my leadership need to look like? And I tried to put some habits in place. And then the H3 premise of humble, hungry, hustle was really the framework that was always true for me, but I wanted it to be more true. And I was really writing the book to, I would say, the next wave of leaders behind me, who are in their 20s and 30s still. That's, anybody can read it, but that's who I really had in mind when I was trying to pin it.
So I want to ask you about this, because I think that story, this, I don't know if you want to call it burnout, however you would describe it, is probably relatable to a lot of the advisors that we support, right? And sure. Especially in light of maybe these past few years and what everyone has gone through, just being maybe not burnout, but just worn down. I think you said that, and that really sounds like how I would describe it for some. Well, you mentioned there were some self-care things that you started practicing. Would you talk about what those were that kind of keep you from going down that path?
Well, self-awareness is a big part of it, and actually giving people permission, who are around you, who are close to you, who work with you, to actually like speak truth back into you. And again, that sounds so simple, but it's so hard to do. I mean, I'll give you a story. This is in the book, but we had a celebration day. We went to Dave and Buster's. We had hit some big mile marker in terms of selling out an event, and this was in the probably the pinnacle of my dysfunction and toxicity as a leader. And we were at Dave and Buster's, and I'm competitive. We're all competitive, so we're all trying to hoop shoot each other out of the room, and we're playing the skee ball, and we get all these tickets. And the team, we were there for a while, so the team's like, we're gonna go get a prize, in the gift store. I'm like, great, I got more important things to do. You guys figure that out. And then they bring back a gift to me. And they're like, hey, Lomenick, thanks for letting us have a celebration day. We got you something at the gift store. And inside the bag, I reach in and there's an angel doll. I'm like, well, what is this? And they're like, that's the you we love. Right? You can see the setup coming. That's the you we love. Thanks for letting us play today. And, we want to follow you anywhere. And then the other thing in the bag was a devil doll. Like, well, what? First of all, why does Dave and Buster's have a devil doll? But I said, what is this? And they said, that's Darb. I said, well, what's Darb? And they said, that represents you, like the toxic leader. And that's been your nickname that we've been calling you like for the last year. And I'm like, I will fire every one of you right now. It took all of them to sort of confront me, in my most toxic state in some ways. But it was like a wake-up call of man, like, really? Like Darb? I mean, and by the way, Darb is Brad backwards.
I guessed that, but I wasn't sure. So, yeah.
Yes. So the E-Doc, Cody is E-Doc or Y-Doc or.
Yeah.
But so many of us, again, like we have these shadow sides, and the team wasn't saying, hey, listen, we need you to pipe down and quit being the driver. What they were saying though is that we love that part of you, but we also love the other part that is healthy and is empowering and has empathy and cares about what we're doing and stays in a place where you really are self-aware. And it was such a great reminder for me that I have to be willing to let people, again, speak truth back into me. And for me, that might be the most important piece of allowing yourself to still be appropriately a hustler and have ambition and be somebody who gets things done and actually is accomplishing and using the gifts God's put in you without ever like getting to the place where you're dysfunctional or you're toxic. And sort of that place where I've heard leaders talk about the redlining of your engine, and you don't want to run your engine where you're way below the expectation, but you also can't keep it in the red line or over the red line for months on end, because at some point that thing's going to break down. And so I really have now taken to this idea that, man, I gotta ask people, and instead of them all confronting me with the Darb situation and the devil doll, it's like, no, let's find ways to get that kind of feedback way before that ever might happen.
Brad, are there any other things that you saw? I love that red line example. It's maybe a great analogy or way to think of that. But are there any other things that you've learned or done? Like maybe you are in that red line for a while, right? I think all of us during business, I mean, I kind of remember that first 4 to 6 weeks of COVID felt like I was in the red line, for a good month and a half there. Are there any things that you've done to either recover from that or bring yourself back down into a normal range?
Well, I think part of it too is always that you have to figure. Again, self-awareness means that I'm really dialed in on the things that I do really well, and the things where I can contribute the most. And when we go into crisis, most of us leaders we tend to get really controlling. And that's actually needed sometimes in the real crisis moments.
Yep.
But that's actually like being aware that I don't have to lead like that all the time. There might be a few weeks, but I'm gonna revert back to now the places where I can add the most value without overwhelming people, and then allow people to, kind of raise their level, to be consistent with mine. And I think this is why we're seeing so many leaders leaving right now. The great resignation, whether you're a CEO or you own your own business or you're a pastor or nonprofit leader, is so many of us during crisis the last 24 months, we've been so consumed with controlling and trying to be in charge, which is needed in certain times, but we can't actually sustain that. It's not healthy. It doesn't allow for us to actually do what we're best at. And then everybody else looks at us and goes, well, I guess they're going to take care of it, so I'll just sit back and coast. And that's not fair to them either. So, what do you think about that? I mean, what have you found? You've been navigating this thing, man, at a high level for, gosh, you guys have grown though. That's the thing. Like, you've actually expanded.
Yeah, I think for us, it's always been a little bit of being able to delegate that out. We had a new hire training yesterday that Dave and I were sitting in. We always meet with the new hires, and that was one of the things we talked about. Is like probably the hardest things of leaders, that delegation, especially from when you started and you do own and know everything going on in the business to as it grows. So there was probably a season in there, I don't know, 2012 to 14-ish time frame, where it probably was a little overwhelming, then actually got good at that, hiring good people and delegating and trusting. And that's a freeing feeling, right? Eventually it takes a while to work through that, and it's probably the hardest transition a leader has to go through probably. But once you get through it on the other side, you can see how valuable it is. So
I would say too, Cody, like just one more thing to add on this. There's a great book by Carey Nieuwhof called At Your Best. And there's a lot of mindfulness books and productivity books that have come out in the last year. I mean, Craig Groeschel wrote one about winning the war of your mind.
Yep.
Rethink Again, or the Adam Grant book. But what a lot of these books are talking about productivity wise, even the Habits book that, James Clear and Charles Duhigg and all these authors have come out with, is what they're trying to help leaders see is that there's certain times during the day, or there's certain moments during the day or during your rhythm of your week or your schedule where you're at your best, and you have to protect that at all cost. And I'm telling you, this has been a game changer for me, like just learning the last several years that mornings for me are when I'm crushing it. And I used to think when I was younger that, wait, don't I have to do like breakfast meetings and a bunch of other meetings that, and I was actually sucking the life out of my best time, not because those weren't important, but there's only certain things that I can do in those windows. And now what I've done just practically is I've moved a lot of things to the afternoon that might look like doing interviews or having phone calls or, being part of a strategy meeting where that's usually with somebody else, and really protecting the time that I have to be protective of. And so many of us think that that's unfair, but it's actually the most fair, because I have to give myself the time when I can only do what I can do. So that's been another one for me that really has helped me change just my perspective on accomplishing things, but also staying in a good rhythm.
I think that's something we see. Our best advisors are really good about being very structured, and like, certain days they do appointments, certain days they don't, that are more designed for the business, or maybe, if they're a morning person and appointments are really important, they're running those in the morning, doing other activities in the afternoon. So, you talked a little bit about habits there, and the H3 book is really, I guess, kind of the whole thing is about habits, so 20 different habits. As you talk to people, or as people ask you about the book, what have you found are some of the keys to changing bad habits into good habits? Any tips there? And I know you mentioned James Clear. We had James speak actually before that book kind of blew up. So I'd been following a blog he had been doing and had him come in and speak to our team. He's laid out a lot of things about how you change habits, but any thoughts or things that have worked well for you?
Well, my advice in terms of habits is just go read his book. I mean,
it is good.
Seriously. I mean, his book, is so good. Atomic Habits, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is really good. Those are two that are always at the top of my list. I think for me, the key that I've found is small steps. Small steps will turn into big results or big changes. And it's this, and this is James Clear, so I'm not saying anything new, but this idea of, 8 years ago, Cody, and this was actually around 9 years ago, maybe. This was around when I transitioned out of Catalyst, when I had sort of the sabbatical season, when I was a bit dysfunctional. Darb was many times in the office instead of Brad. There was also a chubby Brad that existed, like actually close to fat Brad. And I was about 250 pounds. Now, that's, for some people, that's fine. It wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I had gotten out of a rhythm of life of just being healthy because of all the weight. I didn't have time to work out. I was too important, right? If I'm not there, guys. So all of a sudden for me, I reshifted some things and just started walking and eating better. So calorie burn and eating better. But 70 pounds later, I'm still in a place, I think, of being pretty healthy. But it started with, I've just got to start walking. Not I'm going to go run a marathon and so the small and also the idea that your identity has to start to change even before your practices do. So I would have said I'm not a runner pre that season. All of a sudden I started walking and then I started running. I had never run in my life. I mean, never, unless I just had to, because we had to run a mile in high school football to make the team. But all of a sudden I started thinking I'm a runner, which meant now, well, I eat different because I'm a runner. I'm healthy now because I'm a runner, and I'm seeing my identity in a different way. So that's been the thing for me, whether it's eating better, whether it's losing weight, whether it's, you're trying to quit smoking, you're trying to be a better friend, like start small. I think that's the key for me, is that I start small and I actually can accomplish some things that feel like are doable compared to this big goal that, after a few weeks, I'm just going to lose interest.
One of the habits you talk about in there, and this may be a little bit of, what led to some of the Darb outbreak, but I want to ask specifically about it because it's something I see in a lot of the advisor/entrepreneurs that we deal with, but it's the habit of ambition. And in the book, you talk about how, that habit of ambition can be great for us personally as the entrepreneur, but can be very difficult on the people around us. How would I ask this? Is there a key to being ambitious while also leading a good, solid team, but sometimes that team may not be as ambitious as you are? And one of the things I try and tell our advisors all the time, actually we had at this event we just had, one of the guys said, if they were as ambitious as you were, they would own their own business probably, right? So have you found a way to kind of balance how you drive that ambition, but you don't wear the people out around you and get frustrated that they maybe don't operate at that same level?
I think you just said it. I mean, it's so important as a point leader, founder, entrepreneur, owner, that nobody's ever going to care about it as much as you do. So we can't expect them to. That is, and that's freeing, actually. It's freeing for you, but it's also freeing for your team. Now, it doesn't mean that that you have low expectations, but just the mindset that says, hey, I know that I'm gonna always be thinking about this, and that you're not, like, you have other things in life. You're not sitting around like on a Sunday at 2:00 in the afternoon thinking about the vision. You're watching golf.
Yep.
Or you're out like for a walk. So I think just the expectation that that's not going to be true. But also then the understanding that part of my job now, I think as an ambitious leader, is to, and again, you're right. So many of us who build things, we actually now have to fight the very thing that helped us build things. And a couple of things that come to mind. One is is, you've heard John Maxwell say this. I've said it because John told me, but success is about you, significance is about others.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can get to the significance game in my mind, that all of a sudden all my ambition, or a lot of my ambition, if I try to corral it and just suppress it, that's actually when I get frustrated. So I've got to let it run, but I've got to let it run about others. It's the idea of letting my ego leak about other people. So, I can be incredibly arrogant about somebody else, or I can let my ambition just go unfiltered because I'm really like trying to highlight somebody else and make them the center of the story. And that's, to me, that's where, again, I've gotten to is I always I used to do the aw shucks thing. I really don't know what I'm doing, no, hey, we're just trying to figure it out as we go. But now, I'm finding that if I will just talk about other people and make them the hero, that it allows me to accomplish so many things without actually, again, feeling like I have to apologize for what we've built or what we've created. So those are a couple of things that come to mind.
That's good. Talking about building, I want to ask you a little bit about Catalyst, but for a very specific reason. So a little background, you kind of hit it, but Catalyst was really about building these young kind of Christian leaders, grew into a big conference for years. What were the keys that you found to kind of nurturing and mentoring those young leaders? And the reason I want to ask you that is I really think I see it with our advisors, right? Maybe a little older, trying to nurture and mentor these younger advisors coming in. But honestly, man, when I just look around our country right now, maybe our world, you could say that like this need to mentor and develop leaders seems more important than ever before. So I know a lot of our advisors are trying to do that. Were there some keys that you saw to being successful in mentoring these young up and coming leaders?
Put them in the game way early, way before they're ready, way before they even think they're ready. Give them more responsibility than they thought or they think they should have. Allow them to fail. Give them room to run, and that really goes back to, put them in early. Also, like for us as a brand of Building Catalyst, we were trying to listen way more than we were trying to say something, and I think just the posture of being a good listener, being curious, asking questions. How would you do it if you were in my seat? What decision would you make? The old days, the old idea of leadership, or even succession or transition or handing off the baton, was, hey, you can come in the room where we're making the decision, but we need you to sit in the corner. Don't say anything. We're not asking your opinion, but you're in the room. You were brought in, so therefore you should buy in.
Yep.
And young leaders today not only want to be in the room, they want to sit at the table, and they actually want to contribute. Now, what we have to teach young leaders is, listen, your idea stinks, and therefore we're gonna crush your idea. We're not going to crush you. But the way we operate at this table is, we fight for the best idea, and we argue and debate, and it's never personal. It's built on trust. And so we've got to coach and teach young leaders that it's not personal. Like your world's not done or over now because you had a bad idea, but we've got to allow them to sit at that table and be part of the conversation. The other thing is, we were really, with Catalyst, to your question, Cody, we were really intentional about trying to create a holistic approach to how we were making a difference, meaning that, we wanted to impact leaders, but we also knew we had to actually impact the world. We had to make a difference. We had to be generous. We had to have causes that we were connected to. People wanted to see that there was a bigger story besides just, we're all getting together. But what happens when 15,000 leaders get together? And so we were always trying to tell stories of how we're actually impacting the world. We had a bunch of organizations that, we were passionate about giving to, investing in, partnering with, and I think that the other thing is we really took a unifying approach. And, this is true. I think younger in general, and I'm stereotyping, but younger in general they want to feel like they're unified, even, and they're working together with people that they even don't agree with. And so, part of our approach to Catalyst was we were trying to build a really big tent that everybody could come under and be part of and be under the banner of. And we wanted, especially like in the, the Christian leadership world, we wanted people to look at our speaker lineup and go, okay, how did they get that group of people together? Because they don't even like each other. And I've never seen those two or that group on the same speaker lineup. And, we had 100 different organizations from the furthest, extremes and the streams that never talk and never hang out, that all looked at Catalyst and said, well, we can all show up there.
Yeah.
Because it's Catalyst. And that unifying spirit, I think, was something that everybody rallied around. They actually wanted to be a part of. And, the challenge that we had to fight against was everybody wanted to define us. And we had to fight to not be defined, because everybody wants to say at some point, oh, they're the so-and-so gathering, or they're the da-da-da group, or, and we just kept fighting to say, no, we're going to try to not surprise you, but we don't want that to be the definition, because we want the banner to be really big that they can all come underneath.
So I watched Catalyst from afar for years. I've always been a big Andy Stanley fan, so followed it closely. It was phenomenal growth, right? From when that started to what it became. As you have the time to look back now, are there 2 or 3 like strategies or concepts that you think allowed you all to scale that so quickly and so effectively?
We were really, really focused on creating one experience, which was our flagship event in Atlanta in October, the first week of October. We spent 8 years really trying to be the best in the world at putting on that event. And we were probably 5 years late to actually expanding, based on what all the pundits and experts and friends kept saying. Hey, you guys, you got to take it to the West Coast, and you got to go international, and you got to do regional events, and you need to and we just kept saying, we want to be really good at this one thing. And it's kind of the in and out model. They, now they're everywhere, or they're at least in Texas, which there's no palm trees in Texas, by the way, in and out.
No.
But the idea that, man, used to, you had to go to California to get in and out. And so I think the idea of scarcity actually helped us, and that people, you had to come to Atlanta in October to actually participate and be a part of something. And so when we did scale, I think people were saying, finally, there was this kind of built-in hunger or appetite, compared to, we've been. I mean, the other thing in terms of setting the standard, this was again part of, I think, why Darb kept showing up. But we were so focused on excellence and on being the best in the world. We weren't trying to compare ourselves. We weren't trying to compare ourselves to other Christian leadership events. Nothing wrong with that. We were comparing ourselves to Davos, to the World Economic Forum, or to TED Conference, or, to the Grammys, or the Oscars, or the Country Music Awards. Not because we wanted to be like them, but that was our standard. And it forced us to fight and fight and fight to keep raising the level and make an experience that people walked away and thought, that's the best, it's unforgettable. And which, again, it was really hard, but it allowed us to then play at the highest level. And I think that's why so many people would say, well, we got to go, because if we don't, we're going to miss out on something. We got to see what the next thing is. And so I'll stop there, but there's so many things, I think, for a conference, Cody, that, or a movement. We were also really careful not to call it a movement, even though we thought it was. But man, I'm really hesitant, especially in the faith world. I'm really careful to not call something a movement. I think that's God's. That's His responsibility to sort of label something a movement.
You said a couple things there, though, that I think are so applicable, right? As you start to have success in anything, I say this all the time, the more success you have, the more opportunities, come your way. And
Yep.
as an ambitious entrepreneur, you want to tackle them all. But two things that just jumped out to me there. One, this focus on doing one thing really, really well and perfecting that before you go try and do other things, right, was probably part of that. And then the second is, I think this standard of doing that one thing with such a level of excellence that it becomes unforgettable. And we were talking about John a little bit before, John Maxwell, before we started this, but he said something and it was so simple, but he's like, he said, forgettable is forgettable. So he said, you want to do everything you do at this unforgettable level, right? And he's like, most people don't. So he's like, if you do it at that level, like it people are going to remember it. So I think for any business owner, especially as you have more success and more opportunities come your way, being able to focus and do it with excellence is just a huge, huge key. I'm going to use that because you talk a lot in the book about excellence, which I think is one of the most important things for any business owner. I think in the book you title it Set Standards That Scare You, or it's kind of subtitled that. Maybe just walk through that concept of setting standards that scare you.
Well, I mean, we were, a couple of examples from the Catalyst days. The standard of lighting operators, just as one example. And this was in the early days when we didn't really have a lot of budget. I mean, we had a little bit of a budget, but we didn't have Grammy a budget. And we were calling people, Cody, who just got done, like with the lighting of the Super Bowl halftime show, and they're on their way to the Grammys, and then the next thing is they're going to the NCAA Final Four, whatever. Like that's the kind of people we were going after, and we didn't care if they were Christian or not necessarily, but they would get a call from us, and they're like, "Who is this? And how'd you get my number? And why are you calling me?" And we're like, "Well, listen, man, we got this big vision. We want to change the world. We're gathering some young leaders, and you're really going to want to be there. You need to be part of this." And of course, at some point they're like, "Well, do you have a budget?" Well, sort of, but it's going to be 10 times less than you normally make. And listen, I mean, a lot of them said yes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was because we were painting a vision that felt like they wanted to be part of, even if they weren't even sure what it was. And that's when I say standards that scare you. I mean, I remember like some of the speakers. We asked Seth Godin to speak like 7 years in a row, and Seth would just always say no. And I'm like, I'm not giving up. I am not giving up. I want Seth Godin to come speak at Catalyst. And he finally said yes in 2008. And here's what was fun but he had a book coming out called Tribes during that year, and he was like, "Listen, Brad, I think I want to finally say yes, but let's do something big." And I'm like, "Let's go, man." And so we gave his book before it ever came out. It was a month before it ever released. We gave like 13,000 copies of his book to every attendee at Catalyst that year. And we figured out how to make it work. And the thing for me was most people, I think, when we tried to figure that out, they would have stopped at, well, it's too complicated. The publisher don't want to play with us. That we can't get an answer back from them. So let's just have Seth speak, and then everybody can go get the book. They can go buy it at the bookstore. And we just kept fighting for this. Like, no, we have to do this. I mean, I remember one year, Cody, we had it's the Saturday before the event. And that was when I went into like, I'm going to find something that will take it to the next level, even though we're 3 days away. And somebody called me and they said, "Hey, there's this guy at the North Gwinnett County Fair in Georgia, and he shoots himself out of a cannon." I'm like, "Give me his number immediately." So I call this guy and I said, "Hey, what are you doing this week?" And he's like, "I got nothing, man." I think he was from Florida or somewhere. I mean, anybody who shoots himself out of a cannon is, they're probably available during the week. But I said, "Have you ever done it inside? Have you ever shot yourself out of a cannon inside of an arena?" It's like, "Never." I said, "Do you want to try this week?" He's like, "Why not?" So we literally, the truss is going up as he is like figuring out how he's going to shoot himself across this arena. We had to put a net over the crowd, and everybody in the office, all the people who sign the checks and the CFO and the accountants, they were like, Brad, this is so stupid. Why are we fighting for this? And I said, listen, guys, this will be one of the most memorable things we ever do at Catalyst. And it was like the crowd went crazy. It's the most shared video ever. I mean, he's like the greatest moment of his life. He actually survived. But that's what I mean when it's like, no, let's keep fighting for the next best expression. And those are the expectations, I think, that again, when we look around, we're like, well, how am I going to ever figure that out? Well, that's what I mean by set something so high that you're gonna fail trying to get to it, but don't settle for just what everybody else is doing.
The other thing I love about that, because I see this sometimes, as businesses become successful, they can become a little complacent. So constantly raising that standard or that expectation of what is possible, and almost setting that as a culture of like, we're not going to settle for, what we did last year, how that was. We're going to constantly see how we can be getting better and better is a big part of that also.
And it doesn't take money. That's the thing too. Like everybody's like, Brad, you at that point in 2010, when you had a Canon guy, or, you gave away everybody got a copy of Seth's book, or, no, like it's not about money. It's about a mindset. And the most innovative people and the most, sort of standard setting and standard reaching people and organizations many times do that on a very tight budget. Money makes us complacent, especially when we're creating experiences. It can make us complacent. Mm-hmm. So we have to be really careful that we don't allow that to be the excuse. Well, we don't have enough money. We're not big enough. Well, that's actually when you can fight and claw and scratch, and you call the Grammy guy and they're like, how'd you get my number? And you have no budget. And they go, well, I guess I'll come. Yes. The answer is yes.
Well, you gave one other great trick there. It's always ask people to speak if they have a new book coming out. That increases your odds dramatically also.
No question.
Okay, I want to ask one final question, and then I'd love to jump into some of these quick lightning round questions if that's okay with you. I know I've had you on here for a while.
Sure.
So we talked about this, but you spent years working with John Maxwell. I admire him a lot. What was that like? And maybe more importantly, are there a couple things that you learned from your time around John, just whether it's things that he taught you or just things that you observed in him?
He's an empowerer. I mean, that is such a lesson for me. He was incredibly generous and willing to let other people shine. I've heard John say it this way, like if you get to the top of Mount Everest by yourself, that's failure. I mean, take somebody with you to the top. Like, you don't want to take a selfie, right? And even if you go to the top, now once you get to the top, it's your job to step off of the top of the mountain and let other people see the view. And I think that's the thing to me. He also taught me, some of the reason that I actually was able to, I think fairly appropriately and early hand off the baton of Catalyst to somebody else is because John modeled that. He modeled it for me, modeled it for a bunch of the rest of us. So empowerment, giving people opportunities early, allowing them to run with things. He's also a celebrator. And, when we would travel, the few times I got to travel with John and, book tours and other things, I mean, we would hit like the best restaurant in Kansas City or St. Louis or, Salt Lake. And we were sort of like, okay, it's been a long tour, John. I mean, it's been a long day. You've spoke like 3 times. Let's just get to the airport. Like, nope, we're celebrating, team. And we're going to go hit the best restaurant. So just the intentionality towards celebrating, and that for me was such a lesson, because I'm not necessarily the default celebrator.
Yep.
I want to get to the next thing. And it's so important for the team. Like, we look forward to it. I mean, gosh, like we would, in some ways we look forward more to where we going to the restaurant tonight than hey, let's crush the book tour stop today at this location. The other I'll give you one more about John. I got many. He had this. He has, Cody, you've been around him. He has this incredible ability to actually be present with people. And I'm telling you,
unlike anything I've ever seen, actually.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah. Yep.
It's almost like miraculous in some ways, but his ability to connect with somebody. And we've heard this about great presidents, like so many people who, again, rise to the levels of influence. This is true about them. You put them in any environment and they have this EQ, emotional intelligence, that's just off the chart. And John he's incredibly emotionally intelligent. He has an ability to hear and actually absorb stuff that people tell him, but he also is so present in the moment. Even in book signing lines, when there's hundreds of people and somebody comes through and they're like, "Hey, I'm Joe. I love you, John. I've read every book. Hey, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it." And then Joe's gone. And then 30 minutes, Joe comes back because he forgot his pen. And he walks up and John's like, "Well, hey, Joe, what's going on?" And Joe's like, "How did you remember my name in the line of 100 people?" Man, we have, and that, again, for me, like, I want to live out that premise as influential, or as, anytime that I feel like I have the ability to make somebody else's day by being present, I'm going to try to do that because I've seen it in him.
Yeah, he spoke at one of our events and we were backstage, and one of our advisors came back to meet him who had heard John speak like 40 years ago when he was in like seminary school. And to watch him, I've told many people this, like, it was like there was nobody else around at all. They had a 20-minute conversation and John was hanging on every word he said. It was phenomenal. It's actually one of the big lessons I've learned from him is just trying to always be more present when you're with people, because he does it well. Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna add, he always told us, don't be the climber in the room. The climber in the green room, or in the room where all the power is. The climber is climbing over you to get to whoever is most important.
Yep.
Compared to, no, look whoever's in front of you in the eyes, be present. They're the most important thing right now. And that's exactly what you saw backstage at your event.
It was phenomenal. Okay, let me ask you just 5 quick kind of lightning round questions, so they can be quick answers, but been asking these of every guest that we have on. First one, as we look back we're coming up now on about 2 years of this pandemic, that I think a lot of lessons, but what's one lesson that you've learned over these past 2 years that you feel like you'll carry forward for the rest of your life or your career?
Be personal. As you expand your influence, be human and be personal, and stay connected to people personally. That's the biggest thing for me.
I like it. Okay, what was one thing that you did that graduated you from being a good leader to a great leader?
Well, self-awareness, I think, more than anything else, and leading myself well, and knowing the way I'm wired. And man, if you get self-aware and you're authentic, you're transparent, vulnerable, honest, but also just incredibly dialed into who you've been made, the way you've been wired, it's such a freeing thing that then allows you to be confident and humble and actually content. You don't have to walk in with the sandwich board and like, "Hey, everybody, pay attention to me."
That's good. I like it. Okay. What are you doing this year that you're excited about to drive your own personal growth?
Well, I keep doing this podcast, and this is we started the Catalyst podcast in 2005. So I kind of got the Wayback Machine in terms of getting in early, but this H3 podcast for me, that's the thing that, you get free consulting.
Yeah.
You get free consulting when you have guests. So that's the best learning outlet for me right now is interviewing people who I have on the podcast.
And I just listened to your podcast with our mutual friend, Greg Brenneman. So
thank you, by the way.
He's spectacular. Yeah, he's just a spectacular leader. I forgot that you're an Oklahoma Sooner. So I, as
Boomer.
as a fan of the team trying to destroy the Big 12, I won't hold that against you too much.
Are you a Jayhawk?
Wildcat, K-State.
Okay,
so,
Wildcat.
Yeah. Yep. So it's but I do like your coach. So he's an old K-State guy. So
that's right.
I'm excited about him. So
yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry we're leaving though. I'm sorry we're leaving the Big 12. I didn't, on behalf of Joe Castiglione and the athletic department, I had nothing to do with that, and I would like for us to come back to the Big 12. It won't happen, but
they're not to get off topic, but in general, I think there's a lesson there too. I've watched this. A lot of long-term fun rivalries and relationships ended over money, and just going back to what you said, staying connected to people. That's the sad thing out of all of it. I get it. I'm to that point where none of that really bothers or impacts my life all that much, but still, it's just to see these kind of long-term relationships, rivalries, fans that had went to these games together forever kind of disappears. Been the one negative to it, but it is what it is. There's always evolution there.
By the way, the people who wear their colors the most on the ski slopes in Colorado, Kansas State.
Oh, really?
I've never seen more people wearing like jerseys and jackets and like they wear the brand. Everybody else has got on their ski jacket, but Kansas State, man, they are representing
all out. It's that purple, I guess they like. Okay, fourth question. Outside of one of your books, what is the one book that you've recommended the most to other leaders or entrepreneurs?
EntreLeadership by Dave Ramsey.
It's a great book. Nobody's mentioned that one yet, but that is a great one. Okay, final question. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Start with who. In your 20s especially. Those of us who are younger, just starting out. Everybody wants you to focus on the what. What are you majoring in? What are you going to do? And I think starting with who. Who you are, who you're becoming, who you're around. Every great leader, the connecting links, when you look back on their career, is the who they actually ended up like working with, being connected to. Again, John Maxwell for me, man. Otherwise, I don't think I have the influence that I have. So start with who.
That's great. Brad, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show today. If you would tell our listeners, I know I kind of mentioned the podcast, but maybe give them the full details and just any of the best ways that they can connect with you.
Well, I'm on social media, but I'm not a great follow. I don't post a lot, so sorry. But it's at Brad Lomenick, Lomenick, and then the website, either bradlomenick.com or h3leadership.com. And you can get the book anywhere you find books, you can find it there.
Anywhere, my buddy says you're supposed to say anywhere fine books are sold is
anywhere fine books are sold, which i.e. means Amazon.
Correct. Awesome.
The publishers want us to say everywhere, but really at the end of the day, everybody's going to Amazon.
That's where they buy it. So, all right, buddy. I'm glad David connected us a few months ago. Fun. Yep. Looking forward to further conversations. For everyone who listened, if you enjoyed this episode, if you haven't subscribed, do that so you get all the new episodes that are out. But more importantly, if you did enjoy this, go leave a good review so people know it's a valuable use of their time. Brad, again, my friend, thank you.